I was in charge that night, but I had to make decisions based on what I knew in a context that I had never experienced before. And we drill, we practice, but nobody ever plans on having to go from thinking about a surge event to evacuating in an hour, to suddenly the fire knocking on your door in ways that you couldn't imagine. There's a lot that goes into making a decision about how you're going to manage a hospital. A hospital is actually a pretty safe building. I mean, if there's a building that's going to survive a fire, if there's a building that's built to code that has everything in place to try and sustain it, you know, it's a hospital. And to move patients puts them at risk. But at the same time, we were watching the fire close in. We were watching what was happening to the roads. So at 3:30, the fire team, the incident commander from the fire, came in and he said, and I'll remember these words forever, we're making a last stand. So they were using he explained they were using the last 2 rows of trailers and the dry creek bed that's right there between the Kaiser campus and Journey's End to make a last stand. It used that to try and prevent the fire. And so at that time I said, okay, it's time for us to evacuate. And they actually said, we're not advising that, because they are looking at it from a different perspective. But I had to think about, in my mind, I thought, it's one thing to try and evacuate now when they're holding off the fire. It's another, but if they come in and say, the fire's jumped that line, and now with fire coming down on the building, I have to try and evacuate. So I made that decision. But there was a part of me that thought, I'm going to get in trouble for this. You know, making that decision, making that call. In retrospect, it was clearly easy and the right thing, but in the moment, you know, it was and there was I had no basis for making it. I mean, I've never been through anything like that before. I've come into disasters after they've occurred, and we drill some things, but I had never been in a moment like that. I didn't know if the hospital was going to survive.
Josh went to work at 10:30 and we were texting back and forth. There's a fire here, there's a fire there, and I was wandering around the house and trying to go to sleep and not succeeding. And then at 1, maybe 12:30, the lights started to flicker and I could hear kind of some booms in the distance. We live kind of right next to some power lines and there were some weird flashes. So, and maybe quarter to 1, I texted him and said, there's something really weird going on with the electricity. And then at 1, he called and said, there's a fire, a couple miles away. Why don't you get up and just start moving things out, And I did at 1 o'clock. I got up, I got dressed, went out and moved the truck a little closer to the house, and I couldn't see the fire at that point. I came inside and called the neighbor, and she said, oh, we got an evacuation notice. She said, we're just about ready to go. And I went, oh, okay. I ran, some things out to the car, and I could see this glow in the distance, and I thought, oh, that looks big. And I went inside, and I said to Sophie, you have to get up, honey. We're going to have to, at that point, when I saw the glow, I thought, oh, okay, we have to go. And I ran out, and now that little glow down there was like up here, and I could hear the fire. And I don't think a lot of people talk about the noise of the fire, but that's what struck me. I mean, the noise of it was so big that, that's kind of what impressed me, was that thing, to make that kind of noise, that's got to be big. So I ran back inside and I grabbed Sophie and the dog, one of the dogs, and ran back to the car. And then I could see the fire coming up over the hill. So now it's moving so fast, and I ran back inside and I grabbed the other dog and came out. And now the fire is at our property line, and I threw the dog in the car, and I said to Sophie, I just have to try for the cat. And she said, "Don't go in, Mom. Please don't go in." And I said, "I just have to try for the cat. I just have to try for the cat." And I ran back in, and of course it was pitch black at that point. We had lost power, and I came running back out, and then the trees were on fire, and it was just like this, this monster. It was loud and like just racing ahead of itself, grabbing the air, and the air was just red and alive with it, with the wind and the pieces of fire and the ash in the air. And it's like for a moment time stopped, and I just stood in this space, and it was almost like a movie. It was so surreal, and I just thought, this is real. This is real, and you have to keep moving. And at that point, I jumped in the car, and Sophie was on the phone with Josh, and she couldn't even speak. There was just this scream, and it was this like high-pitched, breathless scream, not like a roller coaster scream, just this high-pitched scream. And I could hear Josh on the other end saying, "Just slow down your breathing, Sophie, just slow down your breathing." And I was just shouting at him, I'm driving. There were branches on the road, and I was fortunately in the Highlander. I just clunked over things. And, at one point the fire was on both sides, and we just had to just drive through. And, smoke is not fog, and you can't see through it, and it's just driving blind, and it's just a little bit like, there's the road, just, I know where it is, just drive. And to break through that, and then down into the Larkfield neighborhood, and it was just chaos in the neighborhood. That's where the cops were, and the firefighters, and people were just pouring out of the homes and throwing things in the cars, and Josh was just shouting. I could hear him on the phone, "Just come to Kaiser, just come to Kaiser." So that's what we did. So we were down at Kaiser, I don't, like by 1:20 or maybe 1:30 at the outside. So it all happened very quickly. But I have to say, when I got there, I just felt like getting out of the car and dancing. I just felt like, we survived. It was like, that was just, I am gonna get out of here. I am gonna get out, and I'm gonna get my daughter out. I'm gonna get my dogs out. And we did. We made it. I think it was a bad couple minutes for Josh when he called, and all he could hear was Sophie screaming on the other end of the phone. I think that was, I don't know what he possibly could have thought then, but that was hard. I was very glad to be alive. I am very glad to be alive.